call this special session together for the budget discussions. Mayor Janisch is indisposed a little bit at the moment, and we'll just, I'll move ahead and chair this meeting, and I'll call on Charlene, and she's going to take us through the process.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I wanted to have a little bit of a workshop here to talk about our 2013 proposed budget and the 2013 budget process as a kind of some new things that we're going to do in the 2013 budget process and change the process a little bit. You have a copy of the slides in front of you, and we're going to kind of walk through those, myself and Steve Okens, this evening as we talk about the budget process and give kind of a framework for the 2013 budget process. First, I kind of want to remind you again of, when we start developing the 2013 budget, what are the goals and the mission statement that we develop the budget around? And of course, the mission statement of the City of Willmar is that we're committed to providing responsible municipal services in an open, effective, and efficient manner to all citizens of the local and area community. And the ultimate goal is to preserve and enhance the quality of life for future generations. That's the city's mission statement. It was adopted a number of years ago. In terms of the actual goals that we are looking at for our 2013 budget, is these goals were developed by the City Council at your April 2011 work session, and then kind of reaffirmed in our recent work session in March. But the first goal deals with the leadership and integration of the new city administrator. The second goal is about operations, having efficient and effective services. Our third goal is with infrastructure, efficient investment of transportation facilities and technology. And then connections, building strong public partnerships and engaged community and confidence in city government. And the last goal is of development and kind of the thriving, dynamic regional center. So these are the goals that we try to keep in mind as we are developing the 2013 budget. I want to talk a little bit about the budget calendar for 2013. And where we are in that is kind of in March, the City Council, the Finance Committee recommended a budget calendar, and that was adopted by the City Council, and we're working with that kind of budget calendar. We spent March also working on developing a 5-year capital improvement plan, and we'll be talking a little bit about that a little bit later. The month of April, which is kind of where we are now, is the department directors are preparing their operating budgets. Council work session, that's where we are this evening, April 16th. And then also, as the department directors are preparing their operating budgets, those operating budgets will also be reviewed by myself, the mayor, finance director, and kind of further review of the CIP and further review of that. Another kind of a change in the budget process that we've moved up is in May and June, we're proposing to have the department directors present their proposed budgets to the Finance Committee. That's a change from the prior process. And then June, July is when we really start to develop the mayor's recommended and the mayor's proposed budget, and we start working on that and do that pretty much extensively through June and July. The goal is to have the mayor's proposed budget and the CIP developed by August, and that the mayor would present those to you, the City Council, and the finance and specifically the Finance Committee. And the Finance Committee would, in August, also recommend action on the proposed tax levy. And in September is when, and this is kind of, the dates are set here in September by state statute, which is the adoption and certification of the proposed levy to the county auditor and the truth and taxation hearing. And then again, we would propose again to have continued review of the budget in September and November, and that can be public review and also any additional City Council review and discussion that needs to take place during that time. And then typically, in November, we have had the Municipal Utilities Commission, Rice Hospital, the Willmar HRA present their budgets for review. And the target for the budget adoption for 2013 is December 3rd, and then the certification of the tax levy to the county is December 31st. And that's the budget calendar, and the goal of the 2013 budget is to develop a more integrated budget of the operating, the capital, and special revenues. And we're also trying to build in a few more opportunities for public review and also for council review. Wanted to take a kind of a look at, as we start the 2013 budget, kind of remind you of where we were with the 2012 budget and the adopted up budget for 2012. We adopted a general fund operating budget of almost $12.4 million, capital improvement budget of $7.5 million. I would remind you again that $6 million of that is from the local option sales tax and deals with the former airport, so that's why that number is so much higher than maybe is typical for capital improvements. Special revenue internal fund of $500,000, our debt service of about 2.4, enterprise fund, which is our wastewater, and about $8.8 million. And the total of all funds for our operating budget that were adopted in 2012 was almost $31.7 million. And again, $7 million of that is attributed, or $6 million of that is attributed to local option sales tax. kind of looking a little bit more over the past 5 years, 2008 to 2012, kind of looking at the general operating budget as well as the total operating budget. You can see that there's been a fairly stable operating budget. Now it's almost 12.4, and we see a larger than normal total budget. And again, in 2012, the majority of that is due to the expenses planned for the local option sales tax. But you see an average of a operating budget over the past 5 years of about $12.7 million. And the 5-year average for the total funds is about $24.4 million. That's what our total and our operating funds have been. And the operating fund, general fund, you'll hear me kind of use those terms interchangeably, but the general fund and the operating fund, that's where we fund our daily operations. Most of our public safety, public works, administration, that's our day-to-day operations that are funded in that budget. And so it's our general operating. Next, I want to kind of walk you through a closer look at the general fund revenues, those that fund our day-to-day operations, and see some of the trends there as well. And first, I want to caution you as we go through this, you'll see some numbers for 2013, and I will caution you now and kind of throughout the presentation, those are very preliminary numbers. We are very early in the budget process. These are very preliminary numbers for 2013. They're subject to change throughout the budget process. And so these are some very early and very preliminary estimates. And then if you take a look at kind of where we have been, you can see some trends in our revenues. Our property tax has been increasing, some of that through additional levy, some of that through growth. But you can also see that that property tax levy has been going up, and it ties a little bit to our intergovernmental aid and the reductions we have seen in local government aid. And then we've also seen with the economy, we've seen some of our permits and our building fees decrease, as well as a decrease in some of our service charges. And then our other kind of large revenue sources, the transfers we receive from the utility and Rice Hospital, and those are what you find in the other category. And so you see that we've had about 13.9 million in general fund was estimated for 2012. And then 2013, we're looking at a little bit, maybe around 14 million again. You can see our revenues. We're showing a little bit of an increase in property taxes. We're not proposing any additional levy at this time. That's kind of what we estimate we would bring in with our current levy. And then you can see the intergovernmental aid. We're proposing that to be flat, to not see a lot of change in that. You don't see a lot of change in service charge as well. And then again, some change in the utility and Rice Hospital revenues. On the next slide, you can see it graphically on the screen. It's in color. On your handouts, it is in black and white. It's a little easier to read on the color. But again, it shows you the trend of 2009, 2012 budget year. And again, I would remind you, those are budget numbers. They're not actual at this point. And then 2013, what we might be estimating there. And you can see kind of how the general fund is moving up. It's moved down a little bit and come back up, but it hasn't changed a whole lot over 5 years. Another process I want to talk to you about is capital planning for 2013 and 2017. It's another kind of change in the budget process that we're introducing this year. It's a new planning process and the goal of really developing a more comprehensive 5-year capital plan for the city. And the process has changed. It started with a departmental review and with some new criteria for consideration. And the criteria are, we looked at legal mandates on a project. When we propose a project, will the proposed project bring the city into compliance with an existing or new legal mandate? Is it a local, state, or federal? What's the risk of noncompliance? Is there a mandated time frame and or deadline for compliance? So that's one of the criteria that we try to evaluate projects on. Also, maintenance of existing assets. Does the project enhance or maintain a current asset of the city? Does it extend the useful life of an existing asset? Is it a replacement for a deteriorated asset? Is it an investment that is part of a larger city asset? An example of that might be dasher boards at the Civic Center arena. They're part of a larger asset. They're part of the Civic Center arena, or HVAC for a building, or a roof for a building. And will the project result in a change in operating costs, either positive or negative? And then sustainability. Is the project based on what not only makes sense, the most sense now, but what makes the most sense for the future? And so does it enhance the organization's effort to maintain a healthy and habitable environment? Does it promote, initiate, support, and facilitate the creation of wealth and employment opportunities? Does the project represent a fiscally responsible decision considering the present and future impact to our organization? Then we also look at, again, does the project reduce or offset costs, either in the current or future, through additional revenue or partnerships, improve service at the same cost, or deliver service at a cost per unit of service that is less than what's being provided. So an again, we look at some of the things that we look at under that, or does it provide a favorable return on the investment for revenue generating facilities? What's the payback period of a facility? Does the project allow a percentage reduction in cost to the city through partnerships or other fund sources? Does it provide any economic efficiency, reduced cost per unit of service delivered? Does it offer the prospect of reduced or beneficial operations and maintenance costs for new or renovated facilities? And then we also, another criteria is to look at critical public safety needs or concerns. Does the proposal address an existing or potential threat to lives or property? Would the project, if it's proposed, reduce the risk of death and injuries due to transportation incidents? Would it reduce the risk of damage to or loss of public or private property? Would it facilitate responsive emergency services? Would the project improve the safety of people using public facilities? And then another criteria that we look at is kind of, does it meet the council priorities? Does the proposed project address an issue or concern that has been identified as a council priority? And we kind of go back to those goals that were set in the beginning and set back in April as what the council priorities are. And so is it part of a comprehensive or a strategic plan for the city? Has the project been deemed important by the city council? And again, the goal of that is to establish an overall 5-year planning horizon for the city, so we can really see in terms of our capital needs what we need today, tomorrow, and into the future, and begin to plan with that. And it's been a different process and a different departmental review process. Then I want to talk a little bit about how we fund capital projects, our current way of funding them. For capital improvement projects for our CIP, we've traditionally funded our expenses in one of 3 ways. We fund it through bonding, through debt. We fund through cash, which might be unspent reserves or unspent previous capital allocations. And then there also sometimes are special revenues. So for instance, wastewater treatment projects are funded through the enterprise fund or the wastewater treatment. We might have local option sales tax. We funded some trails through that. We funded, obviously, we're planning to fund work at the old airport, new industrial park through that. And that's how we fund that's how we traditionally have funded our capital planning to date. And then wanted to kind of take and say, when we look over the past years, again, I'm trying to give you kind of a 5-year look again at our capital. And again, I would caution you on the 2013, those are very preliminary estimates. They haven't been refined at this point. But we can see that beginning kind of in 2010, when we started to see some reductions to capital projects, was also capital spending was being used to rebalance the budget from LGA cuts. And we've kind of broken it out for you in equipment and projects. And you can kind of see the difference there, particularly as we go along, that we have spent, we've kind of kept up with equipment, but some of our projects, we have taken quite a bit out of our project budget. And what we're kind of showing again in 2013 is that some of our deferred maintenance is starting to maybe catch up with us. And you can see the equipment number for 2013 looks quite large. Again, and I would also say that these numbers for 2012, they don't include the local option sales tax in there, so they don't include the additional $6 million for local option sales tax in the 2012. But in 2013, the equipment number shows a $680,000 quint for the fire department. So it's a relatively large piece of equipment, expensive piece of equipment that's being shown as a potential need in 2013. And then in the project budget of $997, almost $1 million for 2013, again, it's not showing any deferred items there, so we're kind of just taking a look at what was requested for 2013. It's not necessarily showing anything that might be in 2012 that may not get funded or might be deferred into 2013. And then we started to try to look a little bit farther out into the planning horizon. And again, we're not finished with this work, but we can start to see the needs kind of growing. And these numbers that you're seeing on this page or on this slide for 2013 are only including, or do not include equipment. They just include projects. So you can see, again, we're showing kind of in 2013 maybe a need of almost $1 million. 2014, that increases to 1.4. 2015, almost 1.2. Seeing a very large number in 2016, and then it drops off in 2017. And these numbers don't include the street projects. They don't include any wastewater treatment projects. And again, they haven't been adjusted in the out years for any available financing. And we also, again, haven't adjusted them for deferral. So I mean, what we're showing is kind of what was requested for 2013, what was requested for 2014, and the out years, not really adjusting and saying, well, this was requested in 2013, but we're not going to be able to fund it in 2013, so how much farther out does it have to go and rebalance that? We haven't done that work yet. But this can give you, this is, the intent here is to kind of give you a framework of what some of our capital needs are looking like in the out years. The next thing, and I'm going to turn it over to Finance Director Steve Okins to talk about, is to talk about our street improvement projects, because again, this has been a topic that's been important to the City Council and that we've heard about and wanted to, we've heard your kind of comments on this, and we wanted to talk about this in terms of 2013, how we currently fund street improvement projects and what, you know, funding options, and review that. And I'll turn it over to Steve, and then after that, both Steve and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Charlene. Slide 12 is a representation of the actual street construction work that we've accomplished in the last 5 years. This was compiled by the engineering department, so Holly may be a better source for questions after we're done explaining the funding mechanisms that go into this. But I believe you'll see here that it was kind of broken down between reconstruction, crack filling, seal coating. Some of the major, the overlay and reconstruction are kind of combined. There are other items as I get into the next slide explaining the funding sources that may not have been included in these numbers, and that would be associated bonding costs, other construction that we would have been doing for another governmental agency like the school, county, municipal utilities, those types of improvements. This slide basically tells and explains the funding sources that we've used traditionally to fund our street program. Bonding, of course, is one of the major areas. We have the 10-year street replacement program. 1990 actually was the first year where the council established the Community Investment Fund. And that fund was established primarily to pay for the city's portion of improvements that they weren't going to special assess. There are two major sources that pay for the bonding costs, and that is the special assessments and then the Community Investment Fund. The beginning of 2011, the council took formal action to establish the utility or the Public Reserve Fund. The Public Reserve Fund generates the utility fee. Public Reserve funding, and that title was thought through and established because of the state statute reference at the bottom of the slide, and that is the terminology used in that statute, which allows communities to levy and dedicate a special levy dedicated to the Public Reserve Fund. City of Willmar has not done that to this point. It is an option, and we can talk about that as we get through the rest of the presentation. Municipal state aid. Willmar is a municipal state aid streets. We get somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000 of construction allocation every year from the municipal state aid system. We allocate about $200,000 to $250,000 of maintenance costs into the general operating fund. So the total allocation we get from the municipal state aid system, including construction and maintenance, is about $800,000 to $900,000 a year. The council has a policy if a municipal state aid street is completed or constructed, if the costs are covered from the municipal state aid system, those individuals living along that are still assessed, and that's factored into the overall street replacement program and offsets the amount needed from the Community Investment Fund. And I mentioned the other revenue sources listed there on this slide from the county, school, Municipal Utilities Commission, and the Wastewater Treatment Fund. Those are usually cash contributions. They are included in the total construction, but would not be included in the costs that were previously on slide 12. Again, we have in the presentation the 2013 budget calendar. A lot of this is coordinated and will be coordinated with the bonding for the street program. We have started that process. It will go to the Finance Committee at our next meeting and is coordinated along with any PFA funding for the Western Collector. But it will fall in line with the capital improvement funding that Charlene talked about earlier, as well as the street program. And we are trying to coordinate that so that it goes along with the budgeting process and the council has access to all that at the same time. One of the items that in the past that we haven't done a good job of is coordinating the capital improvement 5-year program and the street program along with the operating budget. And then the September, November, the public review, again, this will give the public an opportunity to coordinate if they're having a street done along with that whole process as well. With that, we would be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Questions from the council? Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. First of all, let me just tell you, I really like the capital improvement plan. I think this is really good, but I do have a question. When we look at years 13 through 17, and we've got these numbers here, when will we see some of the details, things that you are proposing to put in there that, like, for instance, really made 16 jump?
Sure. We're working on those numbers, and we're kind of refining those. I mean, again, I have pushed up the schedule quite a bit, and so it's a big adjustment for the organization. The department directors met a few weeks ago to begin to review and to score the projects for 2013, and then out of that developed, and then kind of looked at the 2014 through 2017, and that's how we've got the rough numbers. We haven't really gone through the process of scoring those projects and such, and refining and kind of moving things around yet. I expect that we'll be doing that kind of here during the month of April, but I can, give you some of the information I can tell you about for 2013 is some of the projects that are proposed are a garage makeup air system for the fire hall, sign reflectivity and replacement. We're looking at dasher boards for the Civic Arena, and that's a large number of about $130,000. And the dasher boards, if you're not familiar with what those are, of course for the ice arena and such, and what stop people from kind of crashing through the crowd. We're looking at some stormwater improvements at the old wastewater treatment plant, looking at a roof repair for the Public Works garage, looking at potential salt storage shed, which is again a large number, about $200,000. We've got some hydrant stocking, we've got some outdoor warning sirens. We're looking at making some adjustments to our, some improvements to our phone system at City Hall on the wastewater treatment. We've got looking at a voice over IP, which is a voice over internet protocol phone system, which is a new phone system, a digital phone system, proposing that in there. Wheelchair lift for the Civic Center, and then the auditorium, replacing 3 doors within the frame. And that's a project that was actually a 2012 project, and it was deferred in favor of another project. So we will have these details kind of in May and June when the Finance Committee is having an opportunity to review. So you'll have these well in advance of the budget as we refine these.
Then will the council take action to, like, approve 13 or approve the whole plan in concept anyway? I mean,
yes, in concept.
Always subject to change.
Yeah, always subject to change. What I'm kind of proposing with this process is that we would integrate the capital budget into the budget process, and when the City Council adopts your 2013 operating budget, you would also be adopting a 5-year capital plan for 2013 through 2017. And that, again, in concept plans, do change in the out years, but that begins to give us kind of the parameters for planning and begins to help us budget better for those things and to anticipate those needs better organizationally. And again, things can get moved up in that list, in my experience with capital plans, and sometimes they can get moved down as priorities shift and change.
Okay,
So
thank you.
That's the plan for the capital budget for this year.
Councilmember Fager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. The levy authority, MS 471, is that something new?
That is a Minnesota statute that's been there for a number of years. It's given the authority to communities to levy and dedicate it for a public reserve fund, which would include infrastructure and those types of improvements, street improvements. It has been there for, I think it's been about 4 or 5 years. I don't know exactly. We have talked about it in the budgeting process, former administrator, former mayors. It's something that has not been chosen to pursue. There is still talk in the legislature about the levy limits being implemented for 2013. There hasn't been any final action on that at this point, but this would be a levy that would be outside of that, from how I understand it.
Okay, so it'd be over and above the utility fee that we charge.
It certainly could be. It could be looked upon, the Department of Revenue likes to do an example of a three-legged stool. You would have the community investment, utility fee, the special assessments, and then an additional dedicated levy. We have done some preliminary calculations, and 1 basis point of the tax rate would generate about $120,000 for 2013.
So that would be on every parcel in the city then?
That would be on all taxable property in the city limits. That's correct.
So nonprofits, churches, they wouldn't pay this fee then?
They would not.
Okay.
Councilmember DeBleek?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Question on the street improvements funding in like, how many miles of street do we currently have in the city? Maybe Holly can answer that.
About 133.
Okay. And we're currently replacing about a little less than, a mile and 3/4.
It varies on how many state aid projects we do each year. Like Finance Director Okins was talking about, depending on our state aid projects, that gives us more money to kind of offset some of the costs for our local projects. Targets have been about 1.5 miles of overlay and 1.5 miles of reconstruction, but it's varied on a year-to-year basis. That's been a target for us.
But it kind of appears to me at that mile to 3/4 to 2 miles, it's going to take a long time to go through all the streets that we have in the city. We're doing what, that's about 1 mile every 50 years?
It takes us a while to get through, but what I would say is in the last few years, we rate all of our streets, and of our streets, I would say, just over about 33 miles are rated in the 81 to 90 ranking, which is good. We have another 27 miles in the 71 to 80. As we get to the really bad streets, the ones that would need reconstruction, we're looking at about 20 miles that are below the 50 rating. So a lot of it is the maintenance piece, the overlay projects that are the streets that are needed. As far as reconstructed streets, I'm looking at probably about 20 to 30 miles that would rate at a reconstruction rate.
And then of that 20 to 30 miles of street that's probably below or rated the lowest, how is that rate as far as the sewer and the water lines that are under that street? Is that total street reconstruction? Or?
Those would be total, more than likely, those would be total street reconstruction because those would be our older streets. And with our older streets, we have older infrastructure underneath of them. So more than likely, yes. I don't have the streets in front of me of what, every street is rated, but I don't have that in front of me. I just have kind of an overall look. So, but we do have that in the office.
Okay. And then how does the stormwater and some of the stormwater task force recommendations fit into the budget?
If you're referring to the bar report recommendations, those would be separate above and beyond street reconstruction projects. Whenever we do street reconstruction projects, we take a look at the drainage on the street and to see if there's any improvements that we can do with the reconstruction. What you'll see with the bar report, I believe, is the majority of the recommendations are new recommendations as far as new ponds, new piping systems to get to those ponds, and so on and so forth. So.
To fund those, those recommendations would take.
They would come out of our capital improvement plan. I mean, if there's not a separate funding source, those would come out of our capital improvement plans, and as such, then they would compete with with the other projects. They would compete with roofs. They would compete with HVAC programs. All of those kind of compete together for funding in the capital improvement plan.
Okay.
If I might interject for 1 second, we did include the initial recommendations from the Stormwater Task Force in our CIP 5-year program for the stormwater improvements, and you'll see in 2013 the recommendation is for the next phase of the old wastewater treatment facility pond, which was one of the recommendations from the Stormwater Task Force. But that is included in the capital projects.
If I could just add as well, there has been 2 funding sources for stormwater improvements to this point. There was $100,000 that was in the general levy That was discontinued in 2012. And then there has been a portion of the utility fee that has covered stormwater costs that are associated with street work, like curb and gutter and redirection of the slope and those types of things. So those were the two funding sources to this point.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Wilkins, the assessment or the assessing ability under, or the levy authority under 471-57, the Minnesota statute you mentioned earlier, is that the vehicle often used by other cities that will continuously, as a portion of the taxes collected, just the general ad valorem taxes, go towards a street fund, for example, and then in lieu of having special assessments, they just use that fund to pay for all their street work?
There are really two statutes that help fund street work. The normal statute that a lot of communities use is Chapter 429, and that's where they have to assess at least 20% of the improvements. And a lot of communities do levy for those costs up and above that, above the 20%. The 471 actually is a second statute that I'm not sure a lot of communities use. We're still doing some research on that and seeing if anybody is actually levying under 471. My knowledge, or what I know about it, they normally use 429, which is then they have to assess at least 20%. In order to do anything where they would not assess at least 20%, they would have to have a referendum to do it a complete project.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Page 3, general fund revenues. Just want to make a comment on the 5 years that we see there, 2009 through 13, the increases on property taxes, the top line, 3.5 to 3.3 to 3.5, 4 and 4.1. The majority of that was probably due to local builders and developers that were expanding the tax base. That's my comment.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, and I agree. I think that is where a lot of that came from. I want to go back to the street funding a little bit. Was it 2 years ago or a year and a half ago we changed our policy and what we were going to do with the utility fees that we collected? I mean, we spent a couple of months doing that, and I thought we were going to look at some additional bonding or something to get our streets improvement moving forward. Am I right on that? And if so, what's happening?
In 2009 was actually the first year that the utility fee was at the $4 level. In 2009, that full dollar amount went into the street program. We did not actually have a bond issue in 2009, but used cash, and most of that cash came from the utility fee. The discussion then took place in 2010 to come up with a funding mechanism, what you're referring to permanently help the Community Investment Fund, which saw substantial decreases in their revenue source, which is primarily interest earnings. Then formally the council in 2011 formulated that. The policy was adopted so that we're slightly behind where our projections were to this point. So we've had 2010 and 2011 funds, and we'll get into more detail on that for the Finance Committee to show where the dollars are at this point. 2014 would have been the first year in that whole program that the council reviewed where you would have had the option of pursuing a local option sales tax because you have to wait 1 full year after the expiration of the current one. So 2014 is when we were looking at the local option sales tax or the statutory levy, Chapter 471, as another revenue source. And it was in the 10th year of that program where the council would have had built up the fund to a point where you could have retired the 10 years of debt that was outstanding at that point. We are slightly behind where we would have been projecting at the end of 2011. But again, it depends on what the council does with their street program. If you accelerate it, that will push back.
Agreed. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rahman.
Thank you, Doug. I just want to comment also, everybody's bringing up the issue of streets, and I think that's a pretty obvious conclusion after driving the streets this spring. And I know that we have had maintenance on our streets, and we've been continuing to improve our streets to the best that we can with the finances that we have. And I know this is going to, I wanted to finally get this off my chest and let it be, but I passed out something. I knew the budget meeting was coming up tonight, and I drove around Sunday to every street in the 3rd Ward and looked at every street. And based on all the streets that I've seen torn up in the city through the years being in the city council and just through my personal observation, it's not accurate, but these are what I feel the bare minimum that should be done. And when I look at the condition of the streets that I mentioned out here in Ward 3, Precinct 1, 2, and 3, we're definitely falling behind. And we're falling far, far, far behind. And that's nobody's fault. It's just that it needs to be addressed. And I know we are addressing it through the certain funds that we've just made changes to in 2010, 2011. But it's not going to be enough. We're not going to be able to do it. And I think we're doing a disservice to our constituents by not budgeting money in our budget for maintenance of streets. It is completely way out of line. What we have in our budget right now, the pittance we have of $10,000 or $20,000 won't even make a dimple in what needs to be done in the city. And we need to address that now. We can't wait another year. The price of oil is going up. The price of labor is going to be going up. It's only going to cost us more as we look back and try to nickel-dime things to death. We're going to have to come up with a very, very strong review of how we're going to go about it. And I am not opposed to taking money out of our savings to get caught up, because otherwise we're going to be falling behind. And every year we let these streets deteriorate, whether it be crack sealing, seal coating, or overlay. It just deteriorates the streets, and then the city taxpayers are paying again to reconstruct their streets, where we should have been maintaining with the property taxes we've been collecting. So either we have to raise the property taxes to take care of this, or we have to shift some money around, or a combination thereof. And I'm glad you're working on it. I just wanted to finally say I'm not going to talk to anybody else about this anymore. I've listed my streets, and there's some of them that are included, not included in there too, that I missed. But I thought I'll just be quiet now. Everybody's got a copy of it. I'm going to let's see what happens.
I appreciate the comments, and I mean, and that is why we wanted to talk a little bit about infrastructure and about streets tonight as we start the 2013 budget framework, because we have heard from the council that those are important items for the budget, and one of the things that we'll be talking about through the 2013 budget is how to fund those, how to plan and how to fund those things in the future.
Mayor.
Charlene, if I may ask you, first of all, can you keep the camera on this side of my face? I might ask you, Charlene, what are our options?
Well, I think, in terms of funding, we've kind of outlined some of the options that we have been using for our funding sources. So there is, there's bonding, there's debt service. We can take out, we can take out debt to pay for capital, to pay for infrastructure, to pay for streets. We can also use cash in our, general fund reserves. We can also use unspent capital. The challenge with using cash and reserve funds, particularly reserve funds, is those are kind of one-time fundings and such. It's not an ongoing funding stream. There are other options are to, consider, as Mr. Okins outlined, maybe we look at, dedicating a portion of the levy or for infrastructure or for street improvements and such. We're not prepared to recommend any one option to you today, but we wanted to let you know that we are working on those things, and that's something that we're going to be talking about through the 2013 budget process, and to show you with the funding that we have available what we've been able to do with that, and again what the needs are, and the needs do they do continue to grow.
If I may, Councilmember Amon, I think back in Finance Director Okens and Councilmember DeBleek will recall, they've been around as long as I have. You know, when we took the turnback on First Street, there was strong concern at that time if we were going to be able to keep up, and just on our maintenance. And prior to that, I don't remember when we initiated our street improvement program.
Basically in 1990.
We had no program prior to that, and we didn't do any crack sealing whatsoever. So I share your concerns, Steve. I really do, and have shared those concerns with many council members over the years, because we've always been coming up a little short on what we can afford to do. And I think we started out with, what, a 15-year program, Steve?
I believe it's always been a 10-year program.
Was it always a 10-year?
We looked out past that, but it was just 10 years has been the bonding requirements.
But, and we do have streets that are in need of reconstruction, and how we can expand that financially, I think is the real puzzle, and how we're going to do that. So I just wanted to say I do share your concerns. Councilmember Dockin.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for the report so far. I want to talk about our unspent reserves and capital allocations. What do we have available? Should we decide, I agree with Councilmember Amon that we need to get after our streets, stay on top of them anyway. So what do we have available in unspent reserves?
The Finance Committee will be getting a report for final 2011 numbers in the next month or so. The capital improvement, or the community investment fund, has built up to $8 million at this point, a little over $8 million. That used to generate about $400,000 to $450,000 in interest earnings that would cover the obligations of the street program. In today's interest rate and investment environment, it's generating about $160,000. So that's why the utility fee and that as a funding source was needed to help supplement and continue the street program at its level and even possibly enhance it a little bit. Now there are a number of other reserves in the general operating and those types of accounts that the city will have to be dealing with a written policy on. Cash flow is a major one. The city has a $3 million deficit by June, or the first part of July, due to the local government aid and the property taxes not coming in until that time. And there are other reserves that the committee has talked about. So as far as each specific one, the Finance Committee and the Council will be getting that data here shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Another question, Councilmember Christians.
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Rahman and maybe probably using some of our cash reserves for the reason that it's making no money in the bank. Our investments are flat. And the cost down the road for repairing reconstruction of streets is going to skyrocket. Fuel, oil, the health care law that's affecting every business. We maybe should have added some or spent some of that this year. We probably even have a chance to do it. But I think timing is everything. And last year was a good time to put money out into the streets because these companies that are doing the jobs are looking for work. And from what I've seen, the estimates coming in are lower than a lot of engineers' estimates. So I think timing is right for taking some of our cash reserves and putting it. We're not making any money on it. Let's put it to use. somewhere. And the streets, as evidenced in the Third Ward, need some work done. And I think Mr. Reese mentioned the crack sealing. I bet that saved many, many, many years.
Well, extends the lives.
Or extended the lives of these streets and roads. And so we need to attack that even more. You can drive up and down the road in the spring and see all the cracking. I mean, you can go out there and you know which ones need to be done. And if they aren't attended to, they just get worse. And then again, once again, I would ask that we somewhere do a demonstration plot of some foam underneath the road somewhere, some place where there's streets in town where every year the same place buckles. Just try it once. I mean, let's get into the 21st century here. And speaking of that, is there any money anywhere in the budget for technology or?
The technology upgrades we are proposing are with our phone system. I mean, we have looked at costs for electronic agenda and such, and those were proposed in the and I proposed those as part of the capital improvement process. Again, when ranked against all of the other projects, they didn't quite rise to the level to be funded in 2013, but that's something we'll continue to look at. We looked at our phone system and upgrading that to a digital phone system as our higher priority for 2012, or for 2013, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. But we will continue to look at those opportunities. And I agree with you, there's more technology that we can certainly use in agenda preparation and electronic agendas and some things like that. And so we're looking at that.
Is this the place to bring up other ideas? I mean, as far as the budget, or?
That's what I was waiting for.
Is this segmented, or what? I don't know.
Again, I mean, we gave you an hour to do this. I mean, I know that that's not an incredibly long amount of time. We wanted to give you a framework for the budget. We're certainly open to any other questions or comments, and we're open to having, further workshops throughout the process. Again, I can kind of put up here, I think, if it'll let me, kind of where we are in the budget calendar, and just remind you, as it is getting closer to the time for the City Council to start its regular meeting. But to remind you, we are early in the process here, and we are trying to build in more opportunities for review and comment. And so the City Administrator and Mayor and Finance Director will be reviewing department budgets in the month of remainder of April and the first part of May. And then in that kind of second half of May and in June is when department directors are going to be presenting proposed budgets to the Finance Committee. And there's opportunities, again, for questions and comments throughout. And we're certainly, if the council wishes, we can certainly do another kind of workshop like this prior to a City Council. I mean, I just need that direction from the Finance Committee or such. But any other comments, I'd be happy to hear.
Would that take a motion?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we just, this budget workshop was simply planned as a way to kind of kick off the budget process. Again, new city administrator kind of bringing a new, and I recognize it's kind of a new process we're trying to bring, that I'm trying to bring to the budget process, and again, trying to get us with a more integrated overall budget and integrate our operating budgets with our capital budgets and our other budgets as well.
In the past, we've had submissions from the council on forms of
and we can certainly do that again.
Because I know that a couple of council members have addressed that already tonight, and
we can certainly do that again. We can.
I think that'd be a good.
Kind of update and revise those forms, and certainly send those out again.
Can we not? Excuse me.
No, Dennis, go ahead.
Can we not take 5 minutes? And Ron's got some things, just considerations for the mayor, and I've got some things, just quick rundown.
I don't have a problem with that. Does anybody else have ideas that they want to?
I didn't follow the question.
Can we just make some suggestions?
Suggestions for budget for 13.
Okay, yeah, fine.
All right.
Go ahead, Ron was first.
Go ahead, Ron.
Thank you. Privatization comes into my mind. I think it needs to be considered, and we need to take stock of future retirees through all city government, but mostly public works. I know there's guys out there that have been 20, 30 years, and there must be 5, 6, 7, 8 of them going to retire in the next 5 years, and that's forward thinking. So privatization is one. Another is looking at merging some of the city and county things, like we heard at the meeting last Thursday. Charlene's aware of that. Using the local rent-a-car instead of city-owned vehicles sitting anywhere to be used, because I know Enterprise rents to many different cities, and they have contracts, and they're cheap, ridiculously cheap, and they'll deliver the car and they'll pick it up. And then I would just suggest that, what's the term? Well, I guess it's cut is the proper term. If we could ask each department to cut a certain percentage, come up with a percentage, 5%. I don't know what that number is right now, but the rest of the private sector's been doing it, and I know that it can be done in the governmental sector too. And I'll leave it at that for now. Go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, thank you. Some of mine are going to be somewhat similar, but first of all, I wanted to see a flat levy, which it looks like we're doing, and then I wanted to go to a net zero increase on the departmental level. There would be, the amount of dollars that they were given last year would be the same amount that they would get this year.
That is the target that department directors have been given to date, is to work
That's
with that
good.
zero target.
Okay. And then I was looking for some dollars. Technology has been mentioned. I think we really need to look at that, and we may need to make a decision to move some of that up, and that would also include perhaps going to some computer technology for the city council. And then I think we need to make some decisions about funding of the downtown priorities, or at least starting to plan for that. I'll leave it at that.
Member Almond.
Ditto on the last one on the downtown. We're going through all this work. We need to set aside some money for that in the budget somehow, and that's an ongoing concern. The other thing I just want to make perfectly clear that I only drove my ward, our ward, Rick, of this ward. I didn't have time to drive everybody else's. And this is my personal observation, not necessarily from an engineer's perspective. But I also want to say I would not be opposed to any special levy to get caught up on street improvement projects. I think that the people of Willmar realize what kind of condition the streets are in. And if we were going to come up with a plan to systematically take care of the streets to bring them up to current standards, or at least to seal coat them and get them prepared as good as we can to preserve the length of those streets, and they knew that it was going to be happening, they could see it, they could physically see it and touch it if they wanted to. And I think the citizens will go along with that. I guess I want to convey that thought to you, that the few people I have talked to feel it would be a good idea because they realize the condition too. This is just not my own personal vendetta. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember DeBleek.
I guess, I'd like to see a review of our 10-year street improvement plan and our transportation plan as a whole.
Is that it? Mayor, you wanted one more?
I would like to recommend that we have more. I think a lot has been said that is meaningful here this evening, and I would like to recommend that the council set another work session like this for questions and answers.
We could certainly do that. I guess what I would ask is to give the staff an opportunity to kind of put together the information that was requested tonight and put together some additional information, and then a workshop based on that schedule. We can do that.
Okay. Is that it?
Okay.
One more thing.
Just one more thing, and it has to do with the presentation. Acronyms are fine, but I would rather have them spelled out. When I see CIP up there, you know what it is on my tax statement? It's construction in progress. And capital improvement program, and even for the public. And MUC is fine, that we all know that, but some of these, God,
We can do that.
full of acronyms every day.
We'll try to do that and try to work with the space we have, and that's just about how small you want the font size to fit it there. So, but we can work on that. We appreciate that comment.
Okay, do we have to adjourn this?
You need to adjourn this, and then you might.
Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We're adjourned.
Just so you